But John, of course, has a question to ask me about the team in my region, the Detroit Pistons. So go ahead, John. What you got?
Well, this is tied into a little piece of news, which is that Chris Paul returned to the Golden State Warriors last night.
Yes, he did.
And this coincided with a couple of friends that I have, a couple people that I follow on social media as well, that happen to be Piston fans that are not you, claiming this guy, Monty Williams, can't coach. And the Pistons gave him a long contract with a lot of money. I hope that's not true. I hope that he can coach. There's some evidence that he can coach. I tried to make that argument and they came back with, nah, Chris Paul was coaching those teams. And like, not all of Monty Williams' success overlaps with when Chris Paul was on his team, but a lot of it does. So I wanted your take as someone who actually probably does watch more Pistons basketball than a normal human being should.
I think the answer can lie somewhere in between. I think Monty is a coach, especially probably at this stage of his life, where he needs a locker room advocate, a locker room fire and brimstone type that Chris Paul is. Chris Paul doesn't mind being the bad guy, right? And Monty had some stuff going on with DeAndre Ayton, and I think there's been some regrets there. He openly kind of admitted to it even while everything was going on. There are some things about Monty this year that have concerned me. The treatment of Jaden Ivey, or the deployment or lack of deployment of Jaden Ivey. The tethering to Killian Hayes. Like, I'll never understand the whole Killian Hayes thing. Even now, James Wiseman, who I understand why the Pistons are playing him, but I don't get why they're playing him. Like, it doesn't make sense. I think just like players can have bad seasons and bounce back, I think coaches can have bad seasons and bounce back. The one thing you can say, even throughout most of that 28 game losing streak or whatever it was, aside from a few games, they were still competitive. They were still at it. They were still going. So they haven't quit on him, right? Even the devastating game against the Knicks, where they were clearly robbed by the league because Dante DiVincenzo hit Asar Thompson in the strike zone in a way that Ray Lewis would have been proud because he hit him right on the numbers, right? You have a back-to-back from New York to Chicago. Normally, you're dead the next day. You got nothing. That team went out there yesterday and played the best defense that they played all season. That coincides with Isaiah Stewart coming back. And they won a road game, and that is their 9th win of the season. I'm not going to throw roses at anybody's feet. I think it speaks to two things. One, if you got to convince a coach 2 or 3 times to take your money, that should be a red flag. That's like asking a woman on a date like 6 or 7 times. If you get no the first time, you normally back off. You normally, not don't get me wrong, I've had my days of persistence, right? I've had my days of persistence. But usually that persistence only lasts for so long before people go back to their first impressions of you. And vice versa. Vice versa, right? John, there's been like, let me talk myself into this thing. And it may go for a minute. And then I'm like, but wait, I initially thought this. I'm not changing my mind. So I wonder if part of this is that. But part of me also wonders if they have said to Monty at this stage, once they realize that this is not a playoff team, which was, fairly early, right? Because they went from 2-1 to 2-1 forever. Hopefully they've told Monty, hey, just get through this season. Get through this year. And we're going to put more veterans around. We're going to put more players that can fit the style that we want to play and the style that you want to coach. So hopefully, and I'm sure Monty, you don't have to give him truth serum. Monty will say, hey, I haven't done a great job with this team. I haven't been able to figure the talent out with this team. So I would say if everybody is jumping on the Chris Paul as coach thing, did Chris Paul lose that 2-0 lead in the NBA Finals to the Milwaukee Bucks? Because if that's the case, we should put him in the same category that we put Doc Rivers in.
It's fair. It's fair. I mean, look, where you take credit, you also take blame.
The Jaden Ivey thing is inexcusable. That's inexcusable. I'm sorry.
That's inexcusable. And then also, like, again, Piston fan friends. So I get kind of in the weeds with them sometimes. And they were all really upset that he wasn't playing Mike Muscala, despite the fact that Mike Muscala was like one of the Pistons' good players. Like he was playing James Wiseman instead of Mike Muscala.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Mike Muscala was bought out.
He
like
just got a buyout so he can go play with a contender, which is probably why he wasn't playing Mike Muscala.
Yeah. Because I guess they're not trying to win. Although Monty said they're trying to win.
Yeah, that was a weird thing. Like that's the confusing thing for some people, that he'll come out and say in the first practice after the All-Star break, hey, no more experimenting, no more just throwing lineups out there. We're trying to win games in this last whatever of the regular season. And then he throws out the all-bench lineups. And then he throws out, he's playing 12 guys. That's inconceivable in today's NBA. Tom Thibodeau doesn't realize that the Knicks have 12 players on the damn roster, all right? He's playing 3, all right?
Wait, I have a question, though, about this whole Monty Pistons situation.
Okay.
And it's going to piggyback on what happened with the Bucks like a month ago.
Okay.
So the Bucks hire Adrian Griffin, but they're keeping Doc Rivers around. They're bringing in Doc Rivers to be like an advisor, right?
Yes.
He's advisor to the team. He's helping Adrian Griffin, all that stuff. We saw how that worked out. The first sign that Adrian Griffin's not it, they bring in Doc. The Pistons had a very good head coach, a guy who won Coach of the Year not that long ago. And they were like, Dwayne Casey, we're pushing you to the side. You're an advisor or whatever, part of the front office now, and we're bringing in Monty Williams. I don't think that is a great formula for success. Granted, Monty's going to get his bag either way.
Right.
But now you have the old head coach and the new head coach, and they're both in the building at the same time. You know how coaches work. They're not going to be aligned on absolutely everything.
I will say this. Dwayne's been on the road a lot. Dwayne goes on the road and does a lot of scouting. And what part of that comes down to is when they brought Troy Weaver in, Dwayne Casey was the incumbent. And usually you bring a GM in, you allow him some level of autonomy to keep the head coach. And not to say that he probably didn't have the option to move on from Case if he wanted to. But with where we were as far as the pandemic, where the team was as far as going to go from a transition to, remember they had Blake Griffin on that roster and Derrick Rose on the roster and all those other guys. They had to shed a lot of some of that old long money to get to a point where they had, flexibility. And then you go into the coaching search, where even the coaching search was raggedy, by and large. There was Charles Lee and what's the coach in Brooklyn? Kevin Ollie and Jaron Collins. And then Monty Williams appears and they're like, hey, Tom Gores wants him. Arntellum wants him. Let's throw him the bag. And all the circumstances surrounding Monty Williams that he sort of laid out, his wife, his second wife now, or before, during the summer, having breast cancer. And I think it was breast cancer. And now that, some of that was cleared up and everything else, like he felt better to coach. But it goes back to knowing where you have to have a lot of awareness. I think this is how I can sum this all up. You have to know where you are as a franchise. You literally, whether it's Dwayne Casey or anybody else as a coach, you have to know where you are as a franchise. You have to know if you're ready to run or if you're ready to jog. And this team was still in a very walking stage, a crawling stage. They're not ready to run yet. They're not ready to jog yet. They are still figuring out a lot of things about who they are, who they should be. They just had to outright release the number 7 pick in the 2020 draft, Killian Hayes. Because the kid can't play. Not at this level, not right now. And yet and still, he was being given an inordinate amount of opportunities, especially over a guy like Jaden Ivey. I will say this about Ivey. Ivey's competing now, and Ivey has a certain level of resilience that he wasn't letting this situation beat him down. And now you're moving forward with, okay, let's see what happens with Cade Cunningham, who's balling now. Cade Cunningham has been balling since the All-Star break. And you're trying to figure out, where does Cade and Ivey fit together and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's a lot going on. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive over the summer because people ain't coming here to listen to no damn Detroit Pistons podcast, okay?